Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Career Hacking Podcast. Today's guest is Simon, who is one of my best friends from networking.
Hello.
And you run your gin experiences and everything else that's very exciting. So do you want to maybe do a little bit of an introduction and just tell us a bit about what you do at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. So I host gin events. So mainly that is tastings. So typically I will go into a company that might be entertaining their clients, or a team building exercise, or if it's a virtual one, then sometimes companies will get me to host an event with their potential clients, and then they kind of sell after them to them. Or I host tastings in coffee shops, have members of the public come in. I also curate and host the London Craft Gin Cruise, which is having a sabbatical this year, sadly. But I do that. I am a judge in gin tasting awards. Anything involving gin and hosting, I do.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting. I have to ask then, why gin? Why not rum or whiskey or anything like that? Or do you kind of adventure out, or is it just gin?
At the moment, it's just gin. Gin is what I kind of know about and love. I have spent the last year or so kind of improving my palate for rum and reading about the history of rum, so with a view to doing that at some point. But gin's keeping me busy for now, and it's just because I've always really enjoyed it and been fascinated by the history of it.
So can you tell us an interesting fact about gin, and maybe one about rum, because you said you're looking it up at the moment?
So with gin, I guess, going back to the start of it. So it was originally a Dutch drink called Genever, which is a juniper-based drink. It's a bit different from gin. It's made from malt grains, so it's kind of got a sort of sweet profile like whiskey does. How it came to the UK was the English were fighting alongside the Dutch against the Spanish, and before they went into battle, the Dutch soldiers would give them a dram of this Genever, and that gave them Dutch courage to allow them to fight.
Yeah.
Then after that, the English soldiers came back to London, and sort of word of this recipe started to get around London. Meanwhile, our king was Dutch, so he kind of brought Genever back into England, and it evolved from people not being skilled enough to make Genever, making this probably horrendous stuff at the time that had all sorts of bad things in it, and over time it evolved into what we're doing now.
Oh wow, that's so cool. So they went from moonshine to gin, basically.
Yes, pretty much over the course of about the century, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting that it's like a whole century, I suppose. And now, we've got gin, we've got all these other spirits, and I feel like if it ain't broke now, don't fix it. I don't think I see alcohol changing from what it is now. I feel like we've got it just as we should do.
Oh, I don't know. I think things like gin, it's a very easy spirit to evolve, because once you got the recipe, it only takes a couple of days to make gin. So once you kind of have an idea, so gin as a category evolves quite quickly, as opposed to whiskey. You have to age it for how long, so it kind of doesn't really move as quickly. But no, we'll still see lots of evolving booze.
That's true. I feel like it's going to be like Pokemon with the different evolutions. We'll just see a different evolution of gin and things like that. So when you say you do your gin experience and the gin tasting, you do it in cafes and bars, things like that. Where's maybe your favourite venue you've been to when you've hosted an event so far?
So I get to do a lot of things. Well, I really enjoy doing it on the boat. That's fun. But that's a lot of hard work, because that's taking on all the equipment on the boat, setting it up, getting it all on afterwards. So that's quite tiring. But I do coffee shops, and each one's different because each one kind of has the personality of its owner. And I've seen quite a lot of different ones. There's a lovely one I do in Leatherhead called Charlie and Ginger. That's really nice environment. But no, to be honest with you, I enjoy doing it anyway.
That's good. I suppose that's what you want, isn't it? You want to be able to go and enjoy the fact that each one's got its own little nuances. It's all very different, and that's probably what keeps it interesting.
It's got its own personality, and because the people that come for tastings are normally half people that go to the cafe anyway, and half kind of words got around, and so each one's got its own sort of personality, its own kind of type of clientele. So yes, I get to meet lots of people.
That's good. And I suppose you meet lots of people because you do networking as well. So with networking then, do you think it's important for you just because not just for meeting new people, because that's why I go, it's because it's really fun, is do you think it's important as well to get the word out about the gin experiences and everything that you're doing, like the fabulous things with like the gin tasting awards? Do you go to kind of spread the word about who you are as Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I like doing that. I don't mind talking about myself. That's why I'm here. But mainly, I don't get as much direct work from. It's more, you don't really understand what you're gonna, who you're gonna meet, what you're gonna find out. So often it's for ideas. People will sort of say, "Oh, have you thought about doing this or that?" And sometimes I think, well, that wouldn't really work. But sometimes I think, oh, that's a really good new idea. This morning I was with a business coach that I met at a recent networking event. And so, yeah, I think over the course of my career and life from here on in, there'll be those connections will blossom in completely different ways. So sometimes it's a referral, sometimes it's the direct work. But yeah, I don't go with an agenda because it's just pointless. If I went in every time thinking, oh, I'm going to get some work from this, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it takes the enjoyment out of it. Because occasionally I'll go and be like, okay, I know this person's going, and I would kind of maybe want to bring up the podcast to them, if they've kind of got content that would fit. But I don't do that every time. It's just occasionally if it's someone that I already know, like yourself, on LinkedIn or I've already got a connection with. Occasionally I'll look out for that on like the attendee list, but most of the time I just go and I just make friends, and it's the most fun thing. So I think that's why I want to do the podcast and things, is get the word out about networking and how valuable it is, even just to kind of go meet people.
I think also, because when you work for yourself, as I do, it's quite a lonely existence. And when you're in a workplace, you've always got lots of guidance. So someone telling you about, okay, this is what I need you to do, or this is where I want you to be in a year's time. But when you're on your own, you've just got yourself, and so you can get a bit stale in terms of your thinking and your ideas. And also, it's nice because when you tell people, they get kind of energized by it, and it makes you think, oh yeah, this is worth doing it. But yeah, I mean, I started going, I think just a couple of events during lockdown. So for me, I really enjoyed it because it was just a chance to go and have some small talk with people and just find out about what people do.
Yeah, that's true. So with that then, because you said that like, are you self-employed? Do you do that full time? How does your business work at the moment for you, like with your career?
So as of the start of April, I'm doing this full time.
Okay.
So over the course of the last few years, longer than I probably would have liked to, I've been gradually reducing my days and days and days, waiting for that moment where I take the plunge. It's one of those things I wish I'd done earlier, but I've done it now in a way that's not as scary.
Yeah, I think you've got to be sustainable when taking that leap, because as much as everyone's like, yeah, it's a jump, it is, but you still got to, I think, build up to it, and it's got to be a bit more, you've got to think about it before you do it, and think it through, because you definitely won't regret that later, even though you're saying, yeah, maybe I should have done it earlier. I do think it's sometimes better to wait, to still do it, and not like push it off and say like wait until like one day, because I hate that phrase, because like one day just means it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's not keeping it as a pipe dream, but also just thinking, right, how am I going to do this? I think that's a really good approach, is like reducing down your other role and increasing this.
There's definitely a balance, because part of that journey is making mistakes and then learning from those mistakes. And I think if you're under too much pressure, you might make the wrong decisions and think too short term, and it means those mistakes, you can be a bit more philosophical about them. So over the course of lockdown, I changed the business model about 3 times. When I started doing it, it wasn't going to be about gin tastings. It just evolved over time.
So you found your niche then. So rather than, okay, I suppose you could do, not gin tasting, you could do a tasting for like various different things, but then you've narrowed it down to like your niche. I think that's really good, because then the way that you market yourself will be different, and your stuff, exactly like where you go in, and you've got like more of a set plan. So I think that's a really good idea. I think it's hard to kind of, when you've got a very broad scope, to then find exactly what it is, because you don't want to miss out on the other opportunities you could have. But I think when it is broader, it can be difficult, because you can't focus on that many things at once.
Yeah.
So how did you find your niche then to become gin tasting?
So I almost, it kind of had its own natural journey. So to start off with, the idea was I was going to get a horse trailer, and I was going to take that horse trailer around festivals and do a gin bar in the daytime, and then maybe a disco at night, which sounds like the sort of thing a 20-something should be doing, but I'm not growing up. So I bought the trailer, lockdown happened, and so it never went out. And I had a load of gin at home because I'd already done a few pop-up bars all over the place, and I had to do something with this gin. So I set up a gin club. So I sent gin around the country to various people and sort of did it as a subscription service. And that was good because it meant that I was just trying gin after gin after gin after gin. And I went from being a gin kind of enthusiast to, I guess, getting my palate to be really good. And with that, I wanted to make it interesting. So I'd make lots of notes about the history of maybe the area where the gin was from, maybe the type of gin it was. They're quite eccentric and quite fun. So that was really good. The other thing I started doing at the time was I had a friend who's a beer sommelier, and he's been really helpful to me on my whole journey. And he said, "Well, I'm doing virtual beer tastings, so you could do virtual gin tastings." So I did that, and what I found was people were quite shy, and I had to really take control of it. So the tastings became about the history of gin, and each gin was chosen to do a bit of history. And so to begin with, I'd be there on my laptop with all bits of paper stuck around the side of the screen, so I could look like I knew all this stuff by heart, but actually I was kind of like looking at notes. And so doing that again and again, it kind of meant I was revising for an exam, which is good because you worry you get to a certain age, you don't really take information as quickly as you do when you're younger. But through that, I kind of became an expert in the history of it.
Oh, that's good because then, like you said, you've practiced and practiced and practiced. So now, like, well, not that you didn't know your stuff anyway, but now you're like, yeah, you must know like everything.
Well, I think since I sounded like I knew myself before because I had a certain confidence, but now I know. Also, it taught me which stories are kind of fun, and but it's I haven't stopped learning. But in fact, weirdly, I think the more I know, the less fun the stories might become because you kind of start to learn about how the things you said at the start might not be completely accurate. But I still say those ones because they're more fun.
Yeah. I think you need the history behind the gin and also like the charismatic stories and things and embellish certain parts because you've got to make it interesting.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure the history is like very interesting anyway. I do have to ask then. So you said you've got your friend who's the beer sommelier. So what actually is a sommelier? Because I thought that was just to do with like wine, and that was it. Does it apply to any drink or?
So I know it applies to beer and wine. I don't know about any other fields. Because I've not met a tequila specialist or anything like that. I don't know anyone calls himself a gin sommelier. I don't know there's a word for it.
Connoisseur. I would say connoisseur is a good word.
I like connoisseur because I like the kind of 1970s luxury life, sort of bon vivant kind of appeal of it. But no, I think on my LinkedIn profile I call myself a Gintellectual, which is.
I mean, it works.
Well, I'm not yet. Yeah, I think I might put it off, but it's
That could be the title of the podcast: "Interview with the Gintellectual." Because there you go, you coined the term, I suppose now. But yeah, it was interesting because I thought that sommelier was for wine, and I didn't really think there was one for beer. But it's interesting that sommelier applies to both of those, but then maybe not to gin. I feel like it should be able to, but I suppose it's spirits, isn't it?
No, I honestly I don't know what I don't know the etymology of the word sommelier and what would only apply to beer and wine. But yeah, at the moment, I don't think there's. I think I call myself a gin expert. But yeah, I'm not as much of an expert as some people I know.
Yeah. But I suppose you'll get there, and it's just about taking your time and getting more of the knowledge, even though you seem like you know quite a lot about it already. So what led you up to this point then, and having your own gin experience business and being so involved in this? What's your career journey so far that got you to here?
So I've kind of I stumbled through my career really. I was a father at a very early age, and so the immediate need of sort of getting money in took precedence. So every job I've had, I've learned things from, but my background before this was sort of customer service manager. So I'd go into an e-commerce business and set up customer service processes and operational guides and manage a team, that sort of thing. So did that at various businesses, and I was pretty good at it. But I was never going to rise to the top. I don't think. So I don't think I was really made for a corporate world. But yeah, I enjoyed it. But it's only really doing what I do now that I've found something that I think I'm really good at. Really good at.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think was the biggest drawback of like corporate life for you, or like that corporate working world?
So for me, I spent most of my time with startups or small businesses, and you're at the mercy. Well, any business you're at the mercy of the company culture. Um, so with startups, you're at the mercy of whoever runs that business because the whole thing is kind of built in their personality. So I was very, very fortunate to have a guy called Scott that I worked for in various businesses who put a lot of faith in me and just sort of said, you can do this. And it'd be things that you would never get the opportunity to do in a big company. So I learned a lot from that. So I learned sort of good lessons from that, I suppose. And the lessons I learned as well, I learned a lot about seeing how people run businesses and how it's not really magic. It's just people making decisions quickly and learning from their mistakes. Worked for a few bigger companies where it was more about the internal politics. I think it moves very slowly. So you kind of learn a lot about how people react in competing teams and hierarchies. And that wasn't for me. I tended to be a personality hire in those ones. I'd go to the interview, I'd be a bit of a novelty, and I'd make the work environment fun, but I didn't really have much interest in rising through the ranks.
Yeah, and I think as well, like you said, rising through the ranks can be hard. And I think sometimes a lot of things in a bigger company can just take more time because you've got more people to please, more check boxes to tick, everything like that. I know that when I worked in a small company, like in a startup, it was amazing. You learn a lot. Like you said, it's very, very fast paced, and there's a lot of decisions that need to be made like yesterday. So it is difficult. But what do you think you've learned and it has kind of meant the most to you from working in a small business or working with them and then kind of creating your own business? What's been like the biggest takeaway from having that experience to now you being kind of at the helm of the ship, I suppose?
There's no such thing as the perfect decision. It's probably the biggest one. The stakes aren't that high. Just do it and then see what happens. I would say, what else is there? You can edit this maybe quickly. Because there are a few lessons I've learned from it, but my mind has gone completely blank. I guess just really the takeaway that it's, not anyone can do it, but it's so much of it is just attitude and cracking on and doing it. So that's what I learned in terms of seeing how the decisions were made. Because the ones I work for, I've seen quite a lot of pivots in businesses. I worked for one that was a software company, and they just pivoted the entire business model because they suddenly realised that one of their software had an application which was completely different and was potentially could scale better. And that was like seeing people go, oh, we can just change what the company do, was really inspirational, and thus I was able to apply that to other areas in which I did.
Yeah, having that fluidity, I suppose, because it can be difficult. Like because whatever business you run, you're going to have a market, and if the market changes, if the demand changes, you've got to change with it. And I think from a lot of startups that I've seen, maybe struggle and things, it's possibly just because they didn't want to change, and then because they didn't change, then there was no market there anymore, and it's keeping up with that demand. And like you said as well, it's having the right attitude and approach to things, I suppose. If you were to give advice to someone who's maybe, thinking of starting their own business, or maybe they've already started and they're finding it really difficult and they're persevering, but it's quite challenging, what advice would you give to them to have that kind of, right, you've got to keep going, having that mindset and that attitude?
I think take your ego out of it a lot. Don't get too wedded to ideas. Sometimes the best ideas just don't work in practice. It's all in the execution as well. I remember I was chatting to a guy who runs like a credit card processing company, and he was like a multi-millionaire. And I asked him one of those cliche questions you ask people like that. I don't worship the altar of people just because they're wealthy, but I was interested to know how what advice you get. And his advice goes to ideas aren't that important. It's all about execution, which I found really interesting. Yeah, that's true. And I think having understanding of processes helps as well. I mean, that's what I learned in my previous career because everything's kind of tied in. Everything's a journey, and understanding the journey of things helps because then you can understand when it's not working, which part of the machine is kind of broken down and what needs changing.
Yeah, that's true. I think it can be difficult sometimes if, like, you had your own business and, like you said, one part isn't quite working, and you want it to be a very well-oiled machine, which is difficult when it's a small business. And if it's just you, you're doing everything. If it's just a small team, you're probably spread quite thin. And then it's like if something isn't working. If you had to change something, then, like, looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently, do you think?
I don't know because so much of where I am now was based upon just not thinking too much about whether I could do it or not. I started doing it because I was inspired because I had so many friends who started their own businesses, and not only that, I've seen people who run businesses who are very successful who I think I wouldn't trust you to, change a plug.
Yeah.
And that kind of was also inspirational because I just thought, well, yeah, if they can do it, I can do it. I forgot what was the question now.
What would you change looking back if, like, your journey? I mean, there doesn't have to be anything you could change because it's like if you're happy where you are and everything that you've done is led to where you are now. But it's just, are there any changes you do, or if someone was thinking, okay, I want to take that dive, I want to take that plunge, what would you say maybe?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, the only thing I would have done differently, really, in my whole career, is I wouldn't have stayed in. There's a couple of jobs I was in too long. I think recognising that's just a general work thing. Recognising when you've learned all you can learn, having the guts to sort of move on somewhere else because you only get a certain amount of years to learn all those lessons. So that was the main thing. Really. I guess also just have faith in yourself, have faith in the journey you've been on, because especially when you're starting your own business, you're focusing so much on how you can improve that you don't take a lot of time to kind of congratulate yourself on how far you've come. And you're very much in the moment. So, if something's not working, you get frustrated, then remove yourself from that. Whether it's have a conversation with someone else and talk to them about where you come. And as you speak about it, you'll think, oh, actually, I know what I'm doing. And yeah, taking yourself away from those situations also helps your brain be a bit more creative.
Yeah, when you switch off and then your brain can actually, like, come up with new solutions or new ideas.
Yeah.
What was it? I saw a video, I think, once, and it was about the most creative your brain can be is when you're bored. And it's like doing the most mundane tasks because it frees up, like, your space in, like, headspace, basically, that you can then do things. So that's why we have our, like, most creative ideas or best ideas at, like, really sporadic points when you might be doing something like, you're doing the washing, or I don't know, you're tidying up. So, like, for me, it's always like when I'm trying to fall asleep and your brain's just kind of switching off, and then I'm like, this is a great idea for a podcast episode, or this is a great idea for, like, a YouTube video. And I feel like that's when creativity can strike. So it's definitely at weird times.
Oh, I completely agree. I think, my brain is wired that it's so busy that I've got used to finding distractions because I get bored not bored easily, but I'm always looking for something to do. And the one learning I had from this job, my current business, is that that's a real enemy. So I have to be careful to have nothing that emotionally distracts me before a certain time. I try not to reach straight away to a magazine or a book. I try. But yes, I try and do that same thing or going for walks as well helps. It's not. It doesn't feel very natural to do that sometimes because you're used to having to just kind of seek distraction all the time, especially when there's so much out there. But yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I call it being bored, but certainly doing things that don't. Doing repetitive tasks is great. Like everyone's got their meditative sort of process. They may do actual meditation, but for instance, I like hanging the clothes out, bringing the clothes in. I find that really relaxing, and I have to run inside this so often to write down an idea I've had because I'm not thinking about other stuff.
That's true. I do agree as well about I don't know the right word for it, but the one I've come up with recently is almost feeling restless, that it's constantly being distracted or doing something, and then when you're bored, you've not got something new to do, is that then, at least for me, I just get restless. Like I always need to be doing something, especially something new. Um, and I think it can be quite difficult to like mitigate that because I don't like what happens when I become bored.
Yeah.
I suppose, just because I know I'm a bit more irritable, or like I think irritable is the main one. So it can be quite difficult to, like, as you say, understand that, especially if that is a part of your personality. Because I don't think there's too many people I've met that are like that. But when you are, it can be a bit tricky. Occasionally, do you think that being your own business owner, do you think that that's helped with that? Is that a good career choice for someone who constantly needs to be busy? Because I imagine there's a lot of different working parts to it.
It is. It's the areas of my personality, aside from the kind of hosting and the kind of outgoing side of it, which is a big part. A lot of it is I am rubbish at concentrating. I like to do like 10 things at once, which is kind of good with a small business because you are doing 10 roles at once. So that's really useful. I think so. I'm not put in front of a spreadsheet and I'll fall asleep. But if I have to think about those things at once, I'm pretty comfortable doing that. I can kind of picture them all in my head and come back to this and that. I don't normally forget about something.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I do, to be honest, I do like spreadsheets, but that's just because I'm a bit of a spreadsheet nerd.
Don't get me wrong. Actually, I do quite. I have a soft spot for spreadsheets as well, and the things they can do. I'm constantly amazed by what they can do.
Yeah.
So my business is pretty much run on Google Sheets.
Yeah.
But in terms of sort of analysis and that sort of thing, I can do it, but just in short bursts.
Yeah, I like creating things. So I like creating things on Excel, creating a spreadsheet, or like all the graphs, anything like that. And then kind of that's the fun part. But if I had to work with Excel all day, every day, like I have done in the past, I don't think I could do that. That's when it gets boring. When it's the same thing over and over. But then it's like if you're constantly doing like new things, like when I worked at that startup, I did a new thing like every single day or every couple of hours. It was like changing, chopping, changing. After a while it just became spreadsheet. Or it was like the same kind of software, but at the beginning it was very much something different, like all the time.
Yeah.
And I love that. I know that's some people's worst nightmare because they're like, no, I need to get comfortable with something and then I'm used to it. And I'm like, no, I want to be uncomfortable. I want to constantly be like learning new skills and doing everything I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. There are some exceptions. I don't like anything. If I know I'm not good at something and something's going to go out there into the world, then I'll put it off.
Yeah.
So I've been putting off, video marketing, for instance, because I know I've got to be bad at it for quite a while before I'm good at it.
Yeah.
And I know I'll look back and cringe at the bad stuff. So there's a part of that that I find a bit uncomfortable. As an aside, which you probably can't fit in the podcast, but have you seen that guy the American guy, softly spoken on TikTok, who's like an Excel genius?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
It's absolutely amazing. It's the stuff he does. But I'll show it.
So, what are your plans then for the future, just for you or your business?
The future is really to, I guess, do more corporate tastings than public tastings, so I can get some time off the weekends. Move into rum, which I can do now. I just need to crack on with it, and then get the business to a position where I can decide what the future looks like. If it scales, or if it's just me, I don't have plans to scale the business if that's not going to bring me joy in the future. So get to a point where that's a decision I've got to make.
Okay, and that sounds like a good decision to have as well. To be like, okay, I've built up this significant like business of yours, and you're like, this means a lot to me. It's whether you want to pursue it or not. I think that's a good place to be in because it's a nice decision.
Absolutely, I don't believe in sort of growth for the sake of growth. I make it to a point where I've just got a nice work-life balance. Just be in a position where I kind of know what that future looks like.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on today's episode.
My pleasure.
And thank you everyone who's like listening or watching, depending which platform you're on. We will have to cut it short because we may get kicked out of the podcast room. But thank you anyway. Bye.